They said Bamako would fall. They said the Malian state was finished. 12,000 fighters. 6 cities hit simultaneously. The defense minister assassinated in his own home. On April 25, 2026, the enemies of the Alliance of Sahel States launched the most audacious military assault on the Malian government since the 2012 rebellion. For a few terrifying hours, it looked like they might actually pull it off. But Mali did not fall. And in May it began to fight back. This is the story of the encirclement of Bamako, and how the AES refused to break. To understand what happened on April 25th, you have to understand the strategy behind it. This was not a random wave of violence. What the joint JNIM and Azawad Liberation Front coalition executed was a textbook military encirclement operation, applied to an entire country. They did not simply try to seize Bamako by force. They went after the arteries that keep Bamako alive. Since 2024, JNIM had been quietly strangling Mali's supply lines in the south. They targeted the mining region of Kayes. They blocked roads connecting Mali to Senegal, Mauritania, Guinea, and Ivory Coast. Those are Mali's primary corridors for fuel, food, and basic goods. Because Mali has no coastline, it is entirely dependent on overland supply routes. Cutting those routes does not just inconvenience a government. It starves an army. By September 2025, JNIM had imposed a formal fuel blockade, attacking transport vehicles moving from the border to government-controlled cities in the south. Then came April 25. Before dawn, 2 explosions and heavy gunfire erupted near Katy, the military base on the outskirts of Bamako that houses the Malian leader himself, General Assimi Goïta. A suicide vehicle detonated at the home of Defense Minister Sadio Kamara, killing him and members of his family. Fighters dressed in Malian army uniforms entered Katy. Simultaneous gunfire broke out in Gao, Sévère, Kidal, and Mopti. The airport in Bamako was targeted. 3 Russian helicopters were seen scrambling to patrol overhead amid sustained gunfire. In Kidal, rebel checkpoints changed hands within the first hour. 12,000 fighters. 6 cities. 1 coordinated signal. They were not trying to occupy Mali. They were trying to decapitate it. But something went wrong for them. The decapitation strike failed. General Assimi Goïta survived. Mali's intelligence chief, Modibo Kone, whom Western media quickly declared dead, was later confirmed alive by military sources. The Malian Armed Forces, known as FAMA and their Africa Corps allies held Katy and Bamako through the night. They were stretched, bloodied, and shaken. But they held. Analysts now argue that this failure to eliminate Goïta and the Corps command structure was the decisive mistake of the entire offensive. It bought Mali time. Not much time. But enough. By early May, JNIM was pressing hard on the roads around Bamako. On May 6, a convoy of trucks heading from Morocco to Mali was ambushed by fighters believed to be JNIM militants. The road connecting Bamako to Sikasso fell under blockade. Arson attacks were launched against trucks carrying food to the capital. The noose was tightening. But Bamako was not yet cut off. Because FAMA and the Africa Corps were already adapting. Russian helicopters began escorting every major convoy in and out of the capital. On May 3, a joint Africa Corps and FAMA unit escorted a convoy of 100 fuel tankers and 50 trucks carrying food supplies along the route from Bamako to Kalakani and Kuala. The supply line was difficult. It was contested. But it was moving. On May 9, a joint patrol of Africa Corps and Malian army soldiers was conducted between the towns of Katy and surrounding areas to secure the perimeter around the capital. The message from Bamako was deliberate. We are not collapsing. We are recalibrating. In the north and east, FAMA and the Africa Corps were quietly repositioning. Rather than scatter in the face of the militant advance, they conducted what military sources described as tactical withdrawals from Tessalit and Aiguilhawk, consolidating and reinforcing positions in the town of Anafis and around the military base east of Aiguilhawk. The forces that had evacuated the north were not simply retreating. They were being repositioned for what analysts are now calling the coming counteroffensive. In the area of Sedjara, a Su-24 strike aircraft carried out an airstrike on a cluster of militants, killing up to 80 fighters and destroying 10 vehicles. Along the Niger riverbed, mobile units of FAMA and the Africa Corps set up effective ambushes, punishing any militant movement attempting to exploit the chaos. Near Menaka, joint Africa Corps and FAMA operations continued to degrade enemy positions. In Guermararis, a second militant attempt to seize the settlement was repulsed after a brief battle, with weapons and equipment left behind by the fleeing fighters. The momentum that JNIM and the FLA had built in the first week of attacks was fading. Their offensive had peaked. And they knew it. Here is what the Western narrative consistently gets wrong about this story. It frames Mali's position as one of hopeless vulnerability. It counts the loss of Kidal. It tallies the humiliation of Russia. It predicts collapse. But what that narrative misses is the structural resilience of the AES as a bloc. Burkina Faso and Niger have not abandoned Mali. The leader of Niger, General Abdurrahmane Tiani, called on his people to observe a day of fasting and prayer in solidarity with Mali after the April 25 attacks. These are not empty gestures in the Sahel. These are signals of political commitment. The AES was forged precisely because these three nations understood that they faced the same enemy and that their survival is collective. Mali is also rapidly diversifying its security partnerships. Turkey, which has provided advanced drone systems to Bamako over the past several years, pledged further military support immediately following the attacks. China, already deepening its economic ties with the junta, has been engaged in security dialogue. Even Iran has signaled interest in defense cooperation, with discussions about a joint security commission already underway. The window the West thought it saw, a moment when Mali might come crawling back to Paris and Washington, has not opened. If anything, Bamako is moving in the opposite direction. The JNIM and FLA alliance itself carries the seeds of its own fracture. These two groups share a common enemy in the Malian state. But they do not share a common vision for what comes after. JNIM wants to replace the Malian government with a strict interpretation of Islamic law under al-Qaeda's broader project. The Azawad Liberation Front wants an independent secular Tuareg homeland in the north. Those goals are not compatible. The further they advance together, the harder it becomes to agree on what they are advancing toward. Mali's foreign minister has already ruled out negotiations with either designated terrorist group while leaving the door open for FLA defectors willing to return to the Republican framework. That is not the language of a government preparing to surrender. That is the language of a government preparing to fight. What Mali is living through right now is the most dangerous moment in its modern history. The encirclement of its capital. The loss of its northern stronghold. The assassination of its defense minister. Any of those, individually, would be a catastrophic blow to most governments. Mali has absorbed all three at once and is still standing. That is not weakness. That is the resilience of a state that has been forged in fire. The counteroffensive is coming. The question is not whether Bamako survives. The question is when Mali takes back the north. And based on what we are seeing on the ground in May 2026, that time may not be far away. If you found this breakdown valuable, share it with someone who needs to understand what is really happening in the Sahel. The mainstream media is telling you Russia failed and Mali is finished. The ground tells a different story. Make sure you are subscribed and hit the notification bell so you do not miss our next deep dive.